Bihari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Vishnupad Paramahams Parivrajacharya Saraswati Shrimati Divine Grace Abhay Chanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan Ki Jai, Jai Nithai Gaur Premanande Hare Hare Bol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 3, Chapter number 5, Vidura's Talks with Maitreya, text number 2. Vidura Uvacha Sukhaya Karma Karoti Loko Sukhaya Karma Karoti Loko Natai Sukham Vanyada Paramam Va Natai Sukham Vanyadu Paramam Va Vindeti bhuyas tata eva dukkam Vindeta bhuyas tata eva dukkam Yadatra yuktam bhagavan vadanna Yadatra yuktam bhagavan vadanna Vidura Uvacha Sukhaya Karmani Karoti Loko Nathai Sukham Vanyadu Paramam Va Vindeta Bhuyas Tata Eva Dukkam Yadatra Yuktam Bhagavan Vadenna Vidura Vacha Sukhaya Karmani Karoti Loko Bhavtai Sukham Vanyadu Paramam Va Vindeta Bhuyas Tava Eva Dukkam Yadatra Bhaktam Bhagavan Vadenna Vidura Uvacha Sukhaya Karmani Karoti Loko Sukhaya Karmani Karoti Loko Nathai Sukham Vanyadu Paramam Va Nathai Sukham Vanyadu Paramam Va Vindeta Bhuyas Tata Eva Dukkam Vindeta Bhuyas Tata eva dukkam Yadatra yuktam bhagavan vadenna Vidura Vacha Sukhaya Karmani Karoti Loko Natai Sukham Vanyadu Paramam Va Vindeta Yukyas Data Eva Dukkam Yadatra Yuktam Bhagavan Vadenna Vidura Vacha Sukhaya Karmani Karoti Loko Natai Sukham Vanyadu Paramam Va Vindeta Bhuyas Tata Eva Dukkam Yadatra Yuktam Bhagavan Vadenna Vidura Vacha Sukhaya Karma Nikaroti Loko Natai Sukham Vanyadu Paramam Va Vindeta Bhuyas Tate Eva Dukam Yadatra Yuktam Bhagavan Vadanna. Word for word, Vidura Uvacha. Vidura said, Sukhaya, for attaining happiness. Karmani, fruit of activities. Karoti, everyone does so. Lokaha, in this world. Na, never. Tahi, by those activities. Sukhi, happiness. Va, or. Anyat, differently. Uparamam, satiation. Va, either. Vindeta, achieves. Bhuyaha, on the contrary. Tataha, by such activities. Eva, certainly. Dukkam, miseries. Yat, that which. Atra, under the circumstances. Yuktam, right course. Bhagavan, O Great One. Vadet, may kindly enlighten. Naha, us. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Charnaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Vidura said, O great sage, everyone in this world engages in fruitive activities to attain happiness, but one finds neither satiation nor the mitigation of distress. On the contrary, one is only aggravated by such activities. Please, therefore, give us directions on how one should live for real happiness. Purport. Vidura asked Maitreya some common questions, which was not originally his intention. Uddhava asked Vidura to approach Maitreya Muni and inquire into all the truths concerning the Lord, His name, fame, quality, form, pastimes, entourage, etc. And thus, when Vidura approached Maitreya, he should have asked only about the Lord. But out of natural humility, he did not immediately ask about the Lord, but inquired into a subject which would be of great importance to the common man. A common man cannot understand the Lord. He must first know the real position of his life under the influence of the illusory energy. In illusion, one thinks that he can be happy only by fruitive activities. But what actually happens is that one becomes more and more entangled in the network of action and reaction and does not find any solution to the problem of life. There is a nice song in this connection. Because of a great desire to have all happiness in life, I built this house. But unfortunately, the whole scheme has turned to ashes because the house was unexpectedly set on fire. The law of nature is like that. Everyone tries to become happy by planning in the material world. But the law of nature is so cruel that it sets fire to one's schemes. The fruitive worker is not happy in his schemes, nor is there any satiation of his continuous hankering for happiness. Translation again. Vidura said, O great sage, everyone in this world engages in fruitive activities to attain happiness, but one finds neither satiation nor the mitigation of distress. On the contrary, one is only aggravated by such activities. Please therefore give us directions on how one should live for real happiness. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Mukam karati vachalam bhangam langayate girim yat kripatamaham vande shiguru dinatharinam paramanandamadagam shichitanish. Hare Krishna. So we are reading a section where now Vidura has finished his conversation with Uddhava. Uddhava has left for Bajrik Ashram and has asked Vidura to go and meet Maitreya at the confluence, I believe, of the Ganges. So yeah, the source of the Ganges river, Haridwar, where Maitreya is staying. Now here in this verse, we know previously that Vidura had talked to Uddhava about Bhagavat Tattva and understanding of the Lord's pastimes, name, form, quality, entourage, etc. And he wanted to learn more from Vidura, from Uddhava. So Vidura asked Uddhava to instruct him, but Uddhava told Vidura that actually Maitreya is nearby, you should take instruction from him. Because Uddhava did not want to transgress etiquette because of a senior person nearby, that he did not want to foolishly go forward and instruct someone senior to him, especially when someone else is present in the vicinity. So Uddhava very gently asked Vidura to approach Maitreya, and he left. And Vidura, feeling the ecstasy of love of Godhead, having known that the Lord thought of him just before he left the world, or wound up his pastimes, he then decided to follow Uddhava's suggestion and went to find Maitreya at Haridwar. And the first question that Vidura asks is a common question. And common question nowadays is pretty much eating, sleeping, mating and defending. That's the common question nowadays. So you can understand the standard in which Prabhupada is talking about common questions. Common questions about the purpose of life, to understand Atata Brahma Jignasa, to understand more about the absolute truth. And the beginning of that is understanding the nature of the living entity, the nature of the material world, and understanding how the living entity is entangled here. Bhagavat Subodhini also gives a secondary reason why Vidura started to talk or question Maitreya some common topics. It's mentioned there, one of the reasons was that out of his natural humility, he asked about common topics. He didn't just simply rush in and tell me about, Krishna, Maitreya, please explain about Ras Leela, Nothing like that. He immediately walked in and he asked a very simple question about the nature of the living entity, putting himself in a humble position. Although he is a Mahabhagavata, he is none other than Yamaraj. And the second reason Subodhini mentions is that actually whatever Krishna spoke to Uddhava was meant for Uddhava, and Maitreya happened to be there. So rather than immediately asking Maitreya, he thought, let me wait, and Maitreya will reveal that knowledge which was spoken to Uddhava by the Lord out of his own causeless mercy. So Vidura had that humility and understanding, and this is the very basis of understanding spiritual knowledge, this humble nature of service and rendering service to the spiritual master, and then inquiring submissively. So Vidura is setting that example, but what really stood out for me was the fact that he inquired into a subject which would be of great importance to the common man. So we don't know, it's not specifically mentioned that there were people assembled there when Vidura was talking to Maitreya. So you can understand that Vidura, being Yamaraj himself, understood that this topic would be relayed later on in life, later on in the course of discussions on the Vedic literature. So therefore, and same thing is there between so many different conversations. In fact, in Bhagavatam you understand what goes on in the mind of devotees as well. So Srimad Bhagavatam is an eternal literature. What's manifest before us is what Srimad Bhagavatam has given us for us to be able to perceive, understand and realize. But of course Srimad Bhagavatam takes different forms. For the demigods it's much more bigger, or greater volume of knowledge to be able to understood and practically applied. So Srimad Bhagavatam is giving us so much nectar in the form of understanding what happens in Hardwar so many years ago that's not even available to us right now. What to speak of many devotees back then. So our great fortune is to be able to be, I think the word is privy to such conversations, to be able to have that privilege of being able to hear what Vidura is saying to Maitreya and the consequent or the subsequent answers that Vidura gets. Now in this purport, there are a couple of themes here that Prabhupada chooses to focus on. One is the whole idea of, or not whole idea, but the whole concept of common questions that Vidura asks, and the reason why Vidura asks the common questions. And then Prabhupada talks about the verse itself, and how Vidura is just breaking it down to the basic level people can understand. And the very basic question, or the very basic essence of people's life is Anandamaya Abhyasat. They're looking for happiness. But the problem is that they're frustrated and bewildered all the time. So Prabhupada then chooses to focus on that aspect. And then finally Prabhupada talks about how despite planning in the material world, it's going to naturally fail. So the common questions, we'll come back to that again. What is the common question that Vidura asks here? He's asking that despite all endeavor for material happiness, we find that it simply aggravates the situation. Neither does it give satiation or does it satisfy one's hunger for happiness. It simply causes more distress. It doesn't even mitigate distress. It causes it. It aggravates it. Aggravation is kind of something is bad, but when you do an activity, it makes it worse. And it reminded me of how that English saying is there, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. So unless you actually know what you're doing with your life, all activities simply aggravate the material distress and the material disease. So here Vidura focuses on the two major problems. One is that there's hankering and there's lamentation. Brahmabhuta prasanatma na sochati na kankshati. One who is in the Brahmabhuta platform, one who's self-realized, he's prasanatma. He's peaceful, satisfied at heart. And he's na sochati na kankshati. He doesn't lament, neither does he hanker. But so therefore you can understand, one who's not Brahmabhuta, they hanker, they lament, and they're never peaceful because of such hankering and lamentation. And why is that? Because in material world, you'll never be satisfied for the desire to be happy, and you'll always be bombarded with distress. So that hankering for happiness is there, and the lamentation is there because the happiness disappears very quickly. So you endeavor so hard for some little minute pleasure, and that disappears. And then we come up with great philosophy saying that actually the pleasure was in the pursuit of happiness. But actually it's just simply sour grape philosophy. That actually you could not get happiness, so therefore you're trying to settle for second best. So you try to make any endeavor to, you make any philosophy out of life just to be able to be satisfied with your failed attempts at happiness. Now, the concept of no satiation, material world is such that despite our endeavors to enjoy, we'll never be happy. Because the nature of the living entity is that we're Satchit Ananda. Right? We are eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. But we have chosen to come to the material world, which is Achit, Asat and Nirananda. That doesn't have these qualities. It's temporary. And that's what makes it illusory. That we expect eternal happiness here, but we won't get it because the nature of the material world is that it won't give such happiness. So I remember I was reading recently, there's this nice website called Srila Prabhupada Lila, SP Lila, and I get the emails regularly. And I was backlogged, so I thought I'd just read them really quickly. And I came across this very interesting section where Prabhupada's talking on a morning walk with some of his disciples in Hawaii. And during these morning walks, it's mentioned that one disciple by the name of Sukadev Prabhu, he would always take the position of a materialist and question Prabhupada, question the philosophy. And so he was telling Prabhupada that actually you Hare Krishnas, you people of religion are just simply hiding behind this concept of God because you could not find happiness in the material world. So therefore you're just using it like a crutch. You're using it as a support just to be able to continue life because you can't otherwise exist. And very interestingly, Prabhupada says actually necessity is a sign of intelligence. So Sukadev was saying that, Sukadev Prabhu was saying that, God is just simply a necessity for you because you have nothing better. Because you fail in material existence, this concept of God and religion and everything is just simply for you to be able to progress, move on in life. It's like a crutch, just a necessity. But actually it's not really a necessity. So Prabhupada is saying actually necessity is the sign of intelligence. If you actually look in the various forms of life, those who don't need any necessities, those who are just simply living, they're of a lower level of consciousness. Like animals, the bare level, eating, sleeping, mating, defending. But as you go on in the higher forms of life, you can take a very basic example. Humans want to go from A to B. Animals want to go to A to B. What happens? The animals just simply use their legs and go. Whereas the humans, out of necessity, then manipulate material nature to be able to go to A and B faster, quicker, more efficiently. So this necessity is a sign of intelligence. So therefore Prabhupada is saying the necessity for understanding a higher purpose in life and more importantly understanding God is a sign of intelligence. So there are two types of people. There are that can be happy in this material world. One is those who are completely what is it Bhagavatam says? Completely stone-like. They're completely absorbed in material nature. Right? And then there are those who are completely self-satisfied, self-realized. These are the two people that can be happy in this material world. Everyone else stuck in between experiences happiness and distress, so-called happiness and distress. And the reason why we experience these dualities, and the reason why we experience these things, because this nature of bhaya duniveshita dvaya bini aveshite, I think it's dvaya abhiniveshita syat. This nature of seeing duality comes from, or feeling fear comes from seeing duality. And that duality comes from seeing Krishna and his energy as separate. Our problem is that we have forgotten Krishna, and our problem is that we are separating the energy from Krishna. I mean, the energy is separated from Krishna in the sense that it goes on by Krishna's will, and Krishna's association with the material energy is not as intimate as it is with the internal potency of the Lord, but it's one and same energy, like how Prabhupada mentions that how electricity produces heat and light, but it performs different functions. So Prabhupada then says that, so our problem is that we are taking the material energy to be separate of Krishna rather than being Krishna's energy. So we think in that sense that this material energy is for our enjoyment. And that stems from the fact of us separating that energy from Krishna. So Krishna, you've got your Golok Vrindavan, you've got your spiritual world, and you've given us this material world. This is for our enjoyment. Like Prabhupada says, when he was walking, on a morning walk, early morning, he passed a playground and he saw the kids playing there, and then he saw the skyline of the city there. And Prabhupada pointed with his cane and he said, kids playground, and then he pointed at the skyline, and he also said that it's also a big kids playground, right? So Prabhupada's mentioning how we are all just simply, it seems to change, manifest in a different way, permutations and combinations, but the basic principle is there, the exploitation of material nature. Whereas the children, they do it on the Annamoy and the Pranamoy platform, the platform of just simply wanting whatever fits in their mouth or simply for their sake of existence. The living entity may even go up to the state of Jnanamoy, trying to understand the nature of life. But until they go to the point of Vijnanamoy and then Anandamoy,
they'll simply try to exploit material nature. Even to the extent of Vijnanamoy, or trying to self-realization, we understand that those who are Jnanis, or those who are endeavoring for understanding the absolute truth through philosophical speculation, they're also exploiting the material world in that sense. It's not fully complete surrender to the Lord. So therefore, you don't see, unless the Jnanis take up devotional service wholeheartedly, we see them fall back down again into material existence. Because, that was the point I wanted to mention in the beginning, that because materialists, and it's a contamination that we've sort of carried on many lifetimes, even though we're practicing devotional service, it will still be there niggling in the back of the head like a thorn. It's still there. That we're practicing Krishna consciousness because we failed in material existence. But actually, who is succeeding in material existence if you think about it? Material existence is like a big ocean. It's like a wave that drowns all living entities. And what generally happens is that out of their own, forcibly, out of control, they are brought together and then they're separated. They're brought together with other living entities and separated. Happiness comes and distress also comes of its own accord. Narad Muni mentions to Vyasadeva, when Vyasadeva explains his bewilderment and his dissatisfaction after compiling all the Vedas and the Mahabharata, he explains that why am I not satisfied? And so Narad Muni explains to him that actually you haven't glorified the Lord wholeheartedly. You haven't purely glorified the Lord's qualities, name, form, qualities, pastimes, and entourage. And there he mentions to Vyasadeva that tasyeva heta prayateta kovido yad labbate brahmatamu pariyadha tal labbate dukkavad anyata sukham kalena sarvatra gabhira ramhasa. That actually a self-realized person, a person in knowledge, will understand that going for happiness and distress is pointless, whether going all the way up to Indraloka or going down to Patala. Endeavoring for happiness and distress is pointless, because just as distress comes of its own accord, so will happiness. So he ceases to endeavor for fruitive activities and instead engages in self-realization. Because naturally, if happiness and distress comes of its own accord, why do we struggle so hard? So therefore he engages all of his energies in trying to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So problem there is that people don't know what self-realization is. So what they will do instead is that they will take up any materialistic process and then they'll take that as a supreme path, as the ultimate path of understanding life or practicing their life or performing any activities in life. And that's all they know. They don't know anything better. So what happens is that they'll engage in such activities for lifetime after lifetime, and material nature will further entangle them in those actions and reactions. So the way material nature works is that she has two potencies, or two ways, or in actions. One is that she covers the living entity, and the second is that she drags them down. So you take it like, I was recently listening to a lecture, it was a very nice lecture about how the mafia works, and it's in relation to Krishna's pastimes when he is a young child stealing butter in Vrindavan. I'll come to that. But when you see movies and you hear how the mafia work is that they'll immediately bag a person, their subject, their victim, and take them to some place. Right? Why? So that they're not able to retrace their steps, find out where they came from. And secondly, they'll tie them to whatever needs to be tied to, concrete them, whatever, and do the needful. So Maya is kind of like that. She drags you down to a place, and she covers you so you don't know how to get out, and she drags you to such a place that you don't know how to get out. You become conditioned to staying there. So Maya's nature, she won't let you come out of material existence that easily. She will test you and test you and test you to the extent only when you take shelter of Krishna. When you finally take shelter of Krishna wholeheartedly, which means you don't see the material nature as anything separate from the Lord, rather you see it something to be used in His service, then that point of time, then Devim Prakriti Ashrita, when you take shelter of that Devi Prakriti, then Krishna allows you, Mameva Pabhadyante, Mayametam Tarantite. Then you're able to overcome material existence. So by taking shelter of Krishna is the solution. Now just a side point I remember about the whole mafia thing. the way Krishna worked in Vrindavan was that he would steal butter. And the way gopis would, the elderly gopis would, all the gopis of Vrindavan would take the situation is that they would relish by complaining to Mother Yashoda. That's how they'd relish Krishna's pastimes. Whereas the Gopa men, the cowherd men, the Gopas, they would relish it by directly chastising Krishna. They would say, they would call him, "You thief!" And then Krishna would say, "I'm not a thief, you're a thief." And so Krishna would enjoy in that way. And I recently heard my spiritual master mention, I can't remember exactly, I remember hearing it before or reading it before, but he was mentioning that Krishna also performed such pastimes even to the extent of a mafia. Like, the mafia would work is that they would come to a particular shop and they would tell them, we will offer you protection if you pay us such and such amount of money. And what is the protection from? The protection is from the mafia themselves. So what happens is that they would go around and they'd ask people to pay such and such amount of money for protection, so that they would be protected from so-called external sources. So then what happens is Krishna was the originator of such tendencies or such principles. Krishna would go to the cowherd men and women and tell them that, you better make your butter and yogurt available and visible for me. Otherwise, what I'm going to do? I'm going to come and torch your house down. I'm going to come with a torch and burn your house down. So Krishna would perform those activities as well. So anyway, so this is the nature of material existence. The nature is that of exploitation. Whereas in the spiritual world, such exploitation is just simply for the pleasure of Krishna. Anything is performed, anything is done, anything is used for Krishna's pleasure. So, so we've come to that point of understanding how in this material world, there's no satiation of happiness, and there's always no mitigation of distress, and more distress comes. And still, because of a lack of understanding of spiritual knowledge and getting out of it, we continue in these activities and become entangled. Right? So Prabhupada says here, in illusion, one thinks that he can be happy only by fruitive activities. Kind of like that Prabhupada example gives of the, I forgot the name of the poet, I think it's Vidyapati. He mentions there that you're in the forest, you're in the desert of material existence, and your happiness is just simply a drop of water in that desert. And I often hear the example of, imagine you're going through the desert for many, many days and you're so thirsty, and suddenly you see a helicopter, and a person comes out of the helicopter with a bottle of water, and then when he comes out and he puts the bottle of water and you put your tongue out, and you're expecting your tongue to be, completely nourished and completely quenched with water, and all that comes out is a drop of water. That is material existence. Hard labor. Hard struggle for existence. That's all material existence is. And we are forced to go through this again and again. And the nature of material world is that it's like a jail with no bars. And despite so many jails in this material world being broken and escaped, jailbreaks and things like that, this material world has never gone through that. Because everyone is entangled in material existence simply by their own activities. And the only way to break these shackles is by taking shelter of Krishna. So Vidura is asking these questions so that gradually what happens is that a living entity understands the nature. So he understands where he is. Because Om Jnana Timirandasya. Because the problem is that we are stuck in the darkness of illusion. We don't know what's happening around us. We are so dependent on our senses and proud of our senses, but we don't know what's, if it's dark, you don't even know what's in front of you. But still we come up with great, great philosophies of life and speculations and justifications for our activities. But Vidura is paving the way to be able for the living entity to understand that the illusory energy has kept us under these, illusion, has kept us in darkness, and that by our activities or fruitive activities of trying to get out simply entangles us more and more. Like quicksand. The more and more you endeavor to get out, the more and more you get sucked in, more and deeper and deeper and deeper. Prabhupada gives this song. He says there's a nice song in this connection. Because of a great desire to have happiness in life, I built this house, but unfortunately the whole scheme has turned to ashes because the house was unexpectedly set on fire. That pretty much sums material existence. You endeavor, you get it, and then it disappears. It goes. and then you hanker and lament for the rest of your life. That's material existence. And we see that example in Etiquette Maharaj. Etiquette Maharaj had everything. He had wives, he had wealth, he had beauty, he had so much opulence, he had a kingdom, he had devotion to the Lord, he had everything. But the problem was he did not have a son. But it wasn't because of gross material desires that he lamented. His desire was that according to religious principles, I need to have a son so that I can be able to pass on this kingdom to him. So still, it's contaminated material desires. So he had everything except a son. And often this point is mentioned here, that for us we think, you had everything, just no son, big deal, get over it, enjoy life. But actually for each one of us, material nature has a little, she tweaks it in such a way that it makes it look like the other person's enjoying real life, and that if I had that situation, I'd be really peaceful and happy. But actually in every single person's life, Maya has kept that thorn that always pricks and causes difficulties in life, always. So one may have a nice family, one may have children, good education, but the health is not good. One may have everything, but financial situation is not good. There's always a pain point, there's always that pang that's always there. So the nature of material existence is like that. But how did Chitraketu overcome that? By the mercy of the devotee, specifically Angira Rishi and Narad Muni, he was able to overcome that. Krishna satisfies the material desires of the living entity in such a way that you'll never want it again. You'll never want it again. So for us, we can take great heart or great pleasure in reading Srimad Bhagavatam. You may think, common question, I don't need to read about this sort of stuff. Bring on the Krishna Lila. But actually these common questions are very important for us, because we are stuck in material existence. And we are not, at least I can speak for myself, not completely liberated from material existence. And if Vidura Mahabhagavat is asking these questions and hearing the answers, who are we to reject it? And more importantly, if it's in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam, and Srimad Bhagavatam is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Incarnation Himself, who are we to reject it? And let's forget all of that. We probably can't realize all of these things, but Prabhupada has given this to us. So it's important. Prabhupada has given it to us. So we must read and relish and enjoy and practice Krishna consciousness by hearing the realizations of Maitreya Rishi and how he answers these questions. Vidura said, O great sage, everyone in this world engages in fruitive activities to attain happiness, but one finds neither satiation nor the mitigation of distress. On the contrary, one is only aggravated by such activities. Please therefore give us directions on how one should live for real happiness. So fruitive activities to attain happiness, but neither do you get satiation, neither do you mitigate the distress, and it causes the direct opposite. And Arjuna mentions this in the beginning of the Gita actually. Nimitani viparitani. That actually if I'm going to go to fight, I'm going to fight so that I can gain the kingdom and live properly with my family. But actually if I go and fight, what's going to happen is that I'm going to kill the same family that I'm going to live with. I want to live with. But if I don't fight, I will be killed, and the whole purpose of fighting is defeated. So the very activity is causing the distress. And what does Arjuna then do? He takes shelter of the spiritual master. So ultimately, despite all our endeavors of jnana, karma, anavrittam, any activities, unless and until we take shelter of the spiritual master and follow their instructions, take the shelter of Prabhupada's lotus feet, then only we'll be able to perform bhakti, free from jnana, karma, and all other mystic processes of yoga. And that's what will give pleasure to the heart. Not this fruitive activity of trying to satiate or trying to nullify material distress. Distress will come. Happiness will come. But Prabhupada mentions, and I'll finish with this point in Gita, how does a devotee take it? What is the practical application when you get happiness and distress? Do you endeavor to reduce the distress and increase the happiness? No, that's not how a devotee works. How a devotee works is that, this is in the Stitadir Muni section, end of 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita. I can't remember. I think it's I can't remember. It's straight after how Arjuna asks, how does a self-realized person sit? How does he eat? How does he talk? What is his walk? What is his language? That sort of stuff. So it's 2 verses after that. And Prabhupada mentions in the section, this is the purport where Prabhupada talks about the definition of a muni. Yeah, it's a very nice purport. You'll remember it. Prabhupada says the definition of muni is that you're not considered a muni unless you have a philosophy to counter another person, unless you have something to argue with another person. So there, anyway, in that purport, it's like short purport, 2 paragraphs, but every line is nectar, practical application, bang, bang, bang. The last 3-4 lines Prabhupada's mentioning, when a devotee is in distress, he then prays to the Lord and thanks the Lord that actually I deserve worse. And when the devotee gets happiness, then he prays to the Lord and thanks the Lord for the convenient situation to perform more devotional service for the Lord. So this is the mindset of a devotee. This is the practical application of Bhagavad Gita, of Srimad Bhagavatam. That yes, we have these common questions, yes, we have material distress and happiness, but we are programmed in such a way that we try to use our own endeavor to be able to control the situation, to increase the happiness and decrease the distress. This is how we're programmed. We are entangled in material nature for so long that this is what conditioning means. We are habitually forced into doing these activities of jnana, karma and practicing yoga. But by taking shelter of Srila Prabhupada and all the spiritual masters in the line of Srila Prabhupada, then what happens is that we give up material existence, practice Krishna consciousness, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Practice Krishna consciousness by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And we focus on chanting Hare Krishna, 16 rounds, non-stop, end to end, early in the morning, practice the 4 regulative principles and follow the instructions of the spiritual master. Prabhupada says in so many of his letters that you will attain love of Godhead, you'll go back to Godhead. It's a simple process. If we stick to the foundations, then naturally Krishna and the spiritual master will give us guidance and instructions within the heart, how we can, traverse through the obstacles of material existence and take shelter of Krishna. Final little point or pastime regarding traversing through material existence and avoiding obstacles. I remember I was reading recently, it's nice how we get opportunity to read about Vaishnavas and their realizations, and I was reading about Pankajangri Prabhu's realization. One devotee had asked him that he or she had asked Pankajangri Prabhu that actually in Mayapur Radha Madhav is there, and Radha Madhav's worship is of sweetness. So why have you focused so much on worshipping Lord Nrsingadev? Because Nrsingadev seems to be more in opulence, Aishwarya, whereas Radha Madhav is in sweetness. So why are you engaged in worshipping Nrsingadev? And Pankajangri Prabhu mentions that actually Radha Madhav worship is the penultimate worship, is the top, not penultimate, it is the ultimate worship of the absolute truth. It is Radha Gopinath and Radha Madhav are the absolute truth. But in the worship of their lordships, there are so many obstacles, there are so many obstructions and difficulties that only one with pure unalloyed devotion to the Lord will be able to overcome those obstacles and surpass those burdens and go and continue rendering service to the Lord. Whereas others would generally, a couple of obstacles and then they'll just give up the service very easily because of a lack of devotion. So he mentions that actually, therefore, Nrsingadev has come and given us his darshan and his opportunity of worshipping him, because by his strong, sharp, stone-like nails, he'll be able to destroy such obstacles in our path. So by worshipping Lord Nrsingadev, because as neophyte devotees we have so much difficulties in practicing devotional service. Already one thing is that having a contaminated consciousness and so many anarthas in the heart as obstacles preventing us from, properly performing pure devotional service. So therefore we pray to Lord Nrsingadev, we worship Lord Nrsingadev to break those obstacles and destroy those obstacles within our heart, so that we may be able to offer such loving devotional service to the Lord. So Nrsingadev is present to destroy all the negative obstacles in our life, and at the same time, show us the way, show us the path to be able to serve Shri Radha Gopinath through the Panchatattva, through Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So I just thought I'd mention that point, because I spoke so long about the negativities of material existence, but this is the flip end. There you go. Wake up. That's the flip end. We have the material existence and the negativities. Yes, we focus on that, but then on the other hand, we have what we focus on Krishna Lila, the pastimes of Krishna, so that we become more attracted to Krishna and give up material existence. Therefore, we never give up reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you very much for listening. Oh, we have a question, yes.
We were just going back to the point you were making about the mafia. A man comes to your house asking for money for protection.
Yep.
So what is the right Vaishnava response to someone who comes to your house asking for money?
Actually, it's quite interesting. I was listening to a lecture in Melbourne by my spiritual master. He was in Melbourne, and he asked the Melbourne devotees if they'd had gone through such a situation. And Aniruddha Prabhu, the temple president, mentioned that, a couple of years ago that the mafia did come, a couple of big men came to the temple and told them that, give us money and we'll give you protection. And the devotees said no. And so what happened was that these devotees, they were hounded by these so-called mafia men. They would park outside and harass devotees as they came in and out, and followed them wherever they went on Harinam and things. And one day, when they parked outside, some of these big devotees came out and beat them up black and blue, and they never came back again. So no, that's not the instruction is not to try and beat them up. If mafia comes to your door, avoid. I mean, in that situation, if you do get in such situation, you need to obviously take shelter of the relevant authorities, the government, police, that sort of stuff. I mean, we be practical. I remember I was asked a question, in spiritual life, when people perform something wrong, they think that, it's okay not to apologize, because we're anyway spiritual living entities, it's okay, whatever, keep going on. But actually Prabhupada said that following the four regulative principles brings us from animal life to human life, right? And chanting Hare Krishna helps us transcend that. And Prabhupada says so many times that going onto the platform of goodness is a springboard to enter into spiritual life. So we practice all the etiquette and the Vaishnava culture, and that includes basic human etiquette also. So we're not, in the beginning stages of devotional service, we do a lot of things out of ecstasy. But we need to temper all of that enthusiasm so it's practiced properly. It's not just a shooting star, appears and disappears, but a sustained sort of endeavor. I remember, it reminded me a lot of, I think, Prabhupada Lila, that what happens, or not even Prabhupada Lila, what happens is that I was told by devotee a long time ago when I joined this temple, that in a temple in Europe, a particular person, he was a thief. He was a criminal, and he was escaping the police. And he happened to come upon the Hare Krishna temple, and he joined the temple, shaved up, and became a devotee and practiced and everything. And over a period of time, he became so what is the word? He became rectified in consciousness, that one day he thought, maybe I should actually tell my authorities that